Hi, this is Bineeta Ghoshal, and I am a country reporter for World Architecture Community from India. You know, architects are always remembered for the various design interfaces that they create and bring to life for us. The two architects that we are going to converse with today can aptly be called as architects with a difference. So the reason for calling them so is that they not only have created design interfaces for us, but rather have also been involved in various fields related to design and have been successful in establishing them firmly. They have been involved in research and teaching of urbanism and architecture. They have been involved in writing, as well as have been instrumental in creating a multidisciplinary platform called Design by Design that offers a cross-pollination of various fields of design, not just architecture. So without any much further ado, I would like to invite on board architect Rahoul Singh and architect Lakshmi Singh from RLDA Studio. Okay, so to begin with, whoever wants to take this question, that the first thing that always arises in our heads is, why did RLDA feel the need to go into, I would say, fields of design that are related to architecture? Was it to spread awareness among people about this field, or what was the idea in your head?
Rahoul, you want to take that?
Oh, okay. I'll start, and then when I'm done, you can also add to it. Bineeta, I think some years ago we realized, or we came to a realization that architecture and design is the articulation of intent. Yeah, so you have to sort of construct an argument, and then you find the right medium to articulate that. And sometimes that medium was architecture in the traditional sense, as in building. Sometimes that medium was just through drawing, and at other times just through writing. And on the other hand, different people understand different design fields differently. So sometimes it's easier to communicate through a building, an idea through a building, and other times it's easier to communicate that idea through a piece of furniture or a detail as a part of something else. And when ideas become central to your practice, you then look for different avenues through which you can articulate it, and hence the spread from just sort of the traditional definition of architecture to something that encompasses other design fields. Yeah? Also, I don't think the disciplinary boundaries aren't so rigid anymore, and architecture, as do other design disciplines, encompass a little bit of everything else. Right, so there's this sort of merging of things and a cross-pollination of ideas through different design fields. Yeah. And I think that enriches a project, and it enriches a dialogue, and hence also working with other design fields. Yeah.
Also, I think at least I don't see architecture as a very rigid institution or something that, if we are architects, we have to only practice this. Essentially it's design, right? So whether you're designing a space or you're talking about it, or you're trying to give back to the community, it's the more, I personally feel that the more you kind of go out there, the more enriched your own practice becomes, because you're not a frog in the well any longer. Right. And for me, constantly, I feel that, one has to fight the sense of ego of an architect, saying that I know best and I have said this, so this is what it is. Right. So if you kind of look out at other avenues, and, it just keeps the ego in check as well. And you realize that there's so much more happening that can inform architecture and your own practice, that it's helpful for your own individual growth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So again, it's kind of a pullover from the first question itself, and I don't know if architect Lakshmi Singh would like to take this. It's basically in reference to design by design. Like so far, we have seen that you have incorporated like graphic designing, fabric designing, and so on and so forth in the exposure of architecture and the other fields of design. So how do you plan to take it further? Like what are the new sorts of avenues you want to open up where this platform is concerned?
You see, again, as Rahul just said, architecture, we create these independent silos. We say this is architecture and this is fashion design and that's graphic design and that's product design. Essentially, it's all design. What is design? It's problem solving. It's imparting a sense of aesthetic to something. What is aesthetic? It's a sense of guidelines or rules that, pleases one's senses, right? So I would want to say that, okay, listen, from graphic design, we're going to move to this, or, we're going to move to that. Those are finer nuances that come and may not. For example, design by design in itself, because we finished 10 years of the platform. Now, in its 11th year, we're actually looking to completely reinvent the platform. And there'll be many more, mini sub-platforms that we're going to explore. It may be a little premature for me to talk about that right now. But essentially what I'm trying to say is that design by design was also created for the very simple purpose that we wanted people from different aspects of design to talk to each other, right? Now, whoever that designer is, for example, when we started 10 years ago, social media wasn't such a great, there wasn't such a presence of social media. So graphic design was more paper oriented or, offline. Now there's an entire social media, or let's say, graphic design, which is what do I call it? Media, online media or something, right? So that is another aspect of graphic design that's come in. Similarly, so many other things, products have, they've evolved, fashion has evolved, interiors have evolved. There's an entire thing called, people call themselves spatial designers. They are not interior designers, they're not architects, but they're spatial designers, right? Visualization, communication. So all of these things are smaller aspects of the same one large, all-encompassing field, which is basically design. So however you want to call it, we're all designers, and the more we talk to each other, the more we see each other's work, the better it's going to be for all of us.
Yeah, I'd like to add a bit to that. I think it's important to note and to realize that everybody, irrespective of their background, is in some way both a producer and a consumer of design. Yeah, and design means different things to different people. And what Lakshmi mentioned a little while ago, sorry, about ego. I think that's an important point, because the binary of, okay, I'm an architect and you're not, or I'm a graphic designer and you're not, has sort of broken down. Yeah, it's broken down because of how we consume design. It's broken down because we now have tools to easily create and publish things which don't require such a specific or such a highly developed skill set as it did earlier. So in other words, design has become highly democratized now, which is a very welcome development, because it also empowers people to speak. It gives people a voice. The moment you have a voice, it enables you to give meaning, to think. So it's all part of this this process of self-development in a sense. The other important thing to note is that through design we create culture. Yeah, and that's very, very important, especially in an age of globalization, because globalization also has a sort of a homogenizing effect. That the images that we consume and the images that we produce are sort of spread over large geographical areas, and you lose the local. Yeah, or you marginalize the local, and that's personally for me that's very worrying. And so I greatly welcome the greater democratization of design, the greater cross-pollination of it, and the greater ability to self-publish and put things out there. Yeah, and I think the initiative of design by design made a huge contribution towards that. It gave young practitioners a voice. It gave them confidence. It introduced different fields of design to other designers, which was important. It allowed people to collaborate. And in some sense, it also documented over the last 10 years the development of design practices and design ideas in India or certainly in North India. And so it's a very rich archive as well. Yeah. So that's, yeah.
Okay, great. I think we all learned that it's about opening up avenues for various problem solving design ideas and not just building design. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Coming on to the next one. So I mentioned that you are into research as well. RLDA is a segment of design as well. So how important do you think is the idea of research and field of architecture? And what do you aim to achieve with this segment is what my primary question is.
I think it's central. I think it's central. I think every design studio, every architecture studio is in some sense a research institution or a research lab or whatever the phrase you want to use. And the reason why I say that is that studios, architecture studios, and when I use the word architecture, I mean by extension greater design studios. So studios by necessity have to produce content. Yeah, we're content producers, and we're content producers within a greater cultural landscape. Yeah. So our work is both simultaneously culturally situated. It's embedded within a greater culture, and it's also culturally situating. Yeah, it tells us a lot of what our culture is about. Yeah? And so it's constantly something that's looking both forward and backward. Now we look at history as a reservoir, yeah, a reservoir of knowledge, and we look forward as to what new imaginations that we need to bring to address issues of that are facing us today and what might face us tomorrow. Now it's all very easy to say this, yeah, but to do this in an authentic sense means that you have to allocate both time and resources to it. It's not something you can just sort of pull out of your hat, your hat in that sense. Yeah? So the research wing operates within the greater studio environment, and it informs the practice. It informs the practice to produce what I would hope and at some point would be more critically embedded and critically aware work. So that's the reason on one hand. On the other hand, I think it's important for practitioners and professionals to constantly sharpen their pencils. Otherwise we too get complacent. We too produce just derivatives of our old work. And that's a form of stagnation. And the true test of education is that the process of learning continues through your life. But for that to happen, you also have to have the mechanisms in place that enable or allow that. And the research lab is one of those mechanisms. And so that's why we do it. Yeah?
Architect Lakshmi Singh,
you said it all. You said it all.
So coming to the second part of what I asked, so what do you aim to achieve? Like if I ask you the ultimate euphoric picture of, let's say, when the field of architecture has practitioners who all think that research is an important element. So what do you think we will or we might achieve as a utopia that we can?
I'll tell you, and it's I'm certainly not saying or alluding to the fact that we are anywhere remotely close to that. But because you asked me a sort of a utopic picture that it's everyone as a collective, if we did it, I think cities and spaces would be a lot more resilient to challenges like whether it's climate change or pandemics like what we're facing. people would be a lot more humane and understanding of other people, because it wouldn't be such a top-down approach necessarily. I think so. I think research would provide us with a better understanding of people, places, and processes, and collectively that would allow both individuals and communities to live up to their potential in a far greater way than we currently can. So that's what, hopefully, utopically.
Architect Lakshmi, anything?
No, I'm telling you, he said it all.
Okay. I guess there is some more time. So I'm just, I really want to kind of stray a little bit from our core of the discussion, come to something more recently that's happened, that I'm sure you're aware of the fact that the council is presently trying to initiate amendments in the Architects Law of 1972. So, these are basically directed towards 4 main principles and so on and so forth. So my question to you is the primary thing they are trying to change is the term architectural services, which is not very well mentioned in the law. So if I ask you, as two practicing architects who are out there in the field, what according to you is the definition of architectural services, such that we end up protecting our paradigm, as well as not encroach upon anybody else's livelihood as well? So what do you think architectural services as a term in quotes should define?
Lakshmi, do you want to go first? Or?
No, you go.
Okay. I think the Architects Act, I'm glad that the council or the body of architects is revisiting the act. Yeah, a lot has changed since the early 70s, and it's and so routinely one needs to revisit these things. So I think it's fantastic that they're doing it, that they have the vision and the courage to revisit something like that. So I applaud them for that. Now, a little while ago we spoke about the blurring of boundaries between design fields. Yeah, but it's also important to note that there are specific sets of skills that each designer from his or her particular field bring to the table. Yeah, if I need let's say brain surgery, right, and a dentist comes to operate, I mean it's not going to help. I need a brain surgeon, so I need a brain surgeon. So likewise, I think architecture is a field of both study, a field of inquiry, a discipline of a field of practice, etc. And I think people need to recognize that. I think we as architects, and I'm speaking as an architect, need to accept that responsibility. And I think people need to trust us also with that. Now, so it's a two-way sort of conversation that happens. In the conventional sense of the word, yes, architecture is restricted to, let's say, the quote-unquote built environment and sort of greater habitats. And of course, you have allied professionals of urban designers and urban planners and landscape architects and interior designers and sustainable architects. And, that also sort of plug in. But just for the moment, if we encompass them all into the same larger umbrella, these are all specialized disciplines and professions, and the services that one provides the act needs to allow freedom to practice. The act needs to have enough flexibility to allow a certain amount of freedom to practice. So the definition has to have a little bit of elasticity built into it, but it can't be so elastic that you get a dentist to do your brain surgery, because then that's detrimental for the state of architecture and the state of our cities, and ultimately it's not going to help anybody. It's not going to help anybody.
Also,
Yeah, and I think also one needs to recognize that architecture and building is not an economic activity. Now you can't reduce it to an economic argument solely. Housing is not just about the number of units. I mean, if you're looking at it as just the number of units, you may need to get an accountant more than an architect on board, right? So, so the whole notion of designing for people, for places, for climates, for culture, etc., gets embedded into that, and that's an immense responsibility, and it comes with a fair amount of work, both as a student and as a practitioner as well.
Yeah, and what I'm personally a little distressed, especially in this country, because when we're looking at the education level, we lump architecture with engineers. So it's almost like we are told that if you were not intelligent enough to get an engineering college entrance, doesn't matter, don't feel sad, you can always do architecture, right? So you get a number of students in architecture who really are not interested in the field of architecture. They were really keen on an engineering, and they just happened to be here. So that's one aspect of education where there is. And then after that, in the professional sphere or realm, when you get in, then you're saying, oh, listen, there is nothing technical about you. So whether a designer is designing the house or an architect is designing the house, it's the same thing. So I think architecture has always been known as an art and a science, right? But it's both. So we have to recognize that and create a definition that keeps both of these things into mind. So it's not that if you're it's not purely art, it's not purely decorative. There's a science involved, and it's not purely science as well. So it's not only technical, right? So it's a very interesting, nuanced amalgamation of these two, which has to be defined and spelled out.
Okay. So I guess we're coming to the end of this discussion. So finally, of course, the final question always stands out to be that I've already read in your profile that you are involved in a current community library project. So what are further initiatives or fresher takes that you guys are planning to take hold of, such that we are still to witness that? So what's next is basically the question.
For me, the practice of architecture is not, it's a very serendipitous journey. So it's, I don't think either Rahoul or me kind of get attracted to what's current and saying, okay, now this is the next big thing that's happening, so we have to involve ourselves in it, right? So it's a journey, and wherever that takes us is, we're happy to go. Having said that, my personal inclination is getting more and more into the, giving back to the community. So projects which kind of where I'm able to give a positive input to the community by my skills, I think that really appeals. So I personally feel myself veering towards that side. Now where that brings us, who knows, but maybe that's the path that is appealing at the moment for me.
Architect Rahoul Singh, anything you would like to add?
I think just to reiterate and underscore what Lakshmi said, that community work, in a sense, is very central, because architecture, there's a certain publicness about architecture. It exists out there. It is something that enables people to do different things, to do new things, and architecture in and of itself. I mean, let me put it another way. If one can lend one's skills to redefining or reorganizing spaces and materials and things, that can have a wide effect on a large number of people. And then allow those people to appropriate that space for themselves and make it their own and mutate it to whatever they want. It's just very, very satisfying. Yeah. It's just very satisfying, and you're not working in a selfish manner anymore. And you also realize that how much you can do with how little. Because you don't have huge budgets. you know, but you have huge aspirations, you have huge imaginations, you have huge, you know, people want to do stuff. There's a huge amount of enthusiasm that comes, and you know, when you work on these projects, you're only limited by your imagination, and that's very satisfying personally, and also it, as I mentioned earlier, it helps keeps one's own pencil sharpened, you know, as a designer and as an architect, and it embeds one within a community, which is important. You know, it's important to be part of a community. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I guess that was the end of the conversation with two architects who definitely we established have a very different take on what the current trends of design and architecture are. Thank you, Architect Rahoul Singh and Architect Lakshmi Singh, for joining us today. A big thank you from the world architecture community for doing this. And we hope to connect with you soon again. Thank you.
Thank you, Bineeta.
Thank
Thank you for
too.
having us.
Yes. Bye-bye.